The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome aboard, family. It's good to have you with us on another episode with our good friend Chris S. going through this book, The Language of the Heart, Bill W.'s Grapevine writings from 1944 to 1970. We've been having a whole heck of a lot of fun with it. And Chris is on the line with me right now. You're ready to jump into this week, my friend?
I am, Monty. I am. This really looks like an interesting one. Looks like something that is is a bit controversial. We could get in trouble going over this one, but that's never stopped you and me.
Nope, it has not. So what's this one entitled?
All right, so this is like the rest of this show. We're reading an article that Bill had originally published in the Grapevine, and this is from October 1947, a very long time ago, and it's titled "Why Can't We Join AA Too?" Now, over the years, Monty, the particular tradition of the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking there's been a lot of discussion. There's been people who are strict singleness of purpose, primary purpose individuals who believe you absolutely have to be an alcoholic to be a member of AA or to go to closed meetings. But the way the tradition is written like more wide open. It does say all who suffer from alcoholism, but it also says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So in other words, it leaves a lot of gray area.
Yeah.
And over the course of the last 50 years or so, that gray area has really been tested. So I'm really interested in what he has to say here. He might further define some of the information in the requirement for membership tradition. So let's see what he says. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
Dear AAs, Dr. Bob and I have a problem. We'd like to share it frankly with you. Remember, Dr. Bob is still alive now, and they're still talking by the telephone quite often and visiting with each other at least a couple of times a year. It says, in actuality, AA has a score of founders, men and women without whose special contributions AA might never have been. But somehow the title founder seems to have attached itself almost solely to Dr. Bob and me. A phenomenon due perhaps to the general lack of information about our early days. This sentiment, though it prompts AAs to set us somewhat apart from the whole, is deeply touching to us both. We surely have more reasons for gratitude than anyone in the world, but we are beginning to ask ourselves if this overemphasis will be good for AA in the long run. in so much sentiment for the founders, it is so much sentiment for the founders entirely wise. This is another example of Bill Wilson's humility in print.
Mm-hmm.
He was very, very generous with his offering co-founder status. He offered it to many of the people who were important in the early days, some of them non-alcoholic. So let's see. He says, perhaps we AAs can become a new kind of human society. To a degree hitherto unknown, AA may be able to function upon the power of its own fundamental principles rather than upon the prestige or inspiration of highly personalized leadership. Thus, the whole can become transcending importance over any part. Continued unity and success can then most deeply depend upon God as we understand Him, working vitally in thousands of hearts rather than a few. So he's getting ready, Monty, to turn Alcoholics Anonymous over to the fellowship. This was to happen a couple of years after the printing of this article. And a book, an AA book, was basically written to cover the information up to that period of time called AA Comes of Age. And Bill recognized the fact that Dr. Bob was getting ill. Probably by 1947, he knew Bob had cancer. And he also knew that, he wasn't going to last forever. He did actually last quite a few more years, but he was conscious of the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous couldn't be reliant upon a charismatic founder who everyone wanted to weigh in on every minute detail of the fellowship. So you can see his thinking basically starting here about making sure that the foundations of Alcoholics Anonymous are sound, and again, not dependent on the founders.
Yeah.
And that's a great expression of humility. He was worried more about us than he was about his own prestige and clout within this crazy fellowship that he really did build.
Chris, I think that this is one of the reasons why I encourage people that I work with, and I encourage other members of the 12-step community to investigate the rich history and the other pieces of literature other than just the 12 and 12 and the big book, because I think the best way to get to know somebody that isn't alive is to read about them, and there's a lot of opinions about Bill W. And a lot of them are negative, and yeah, we that's one of the things that we find precious about this man is because he's one of us, right? But there's so much. I mean, I'm learning so much going through the language of the heart about his humble side that tends not to be focused on, at least from what I've seen, by a majority of the membership, at least today. They like to poke at him, and I think when you can't help but see his humility in reading a piece of literature like this, and I that's why I think people, if they want really a well-rounded experience of this particular 12-step fellowship, they really need to dig into much more of the literature than just the basic text.
Yeah, I agree with you, and although I'm a fan of the conference-approved historical works, I've got my hands on everything I can find that's non-conference approved, and some of it starts off with an agenda, like Bill Wilson was a big blowhard that was his reputation was much larger than it deserved to be, and they start writing the book from that premise, and that's what the book proves.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of amateur history stuff, which is really what you get when you get Bill Wilson stuff. You have to combine it in aggregate. Like I've read 20 books on Bill Wilson, and that gives me a perspective that's mine. And I need to tell you, yeah, he was a very, very imperfect person. So are a lot of people who have made incredible
Oh my
contributions
gosh. Yeah.
to mankind.
Yeah.
Like from the biblical times up.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been people incredibly imperfect who have shifted the direction of modern man. And what Bill did was Bill got us searching inside for the solution to alcoholism. Like, we need to do a ton of self-reflection, and you see that self-reflection in his writings and in his the very, very humble way sometimes he approaches an issue. Really, not raising his hand and saying, "Look, I've been sober longer than any of you. Let me tell you how it is." You're
Yeah.
never going to hear that type of an attitude from Bill. So my fan, being a fan of Bill Wilson has just grown the more I've learned about him, and the more I've learned about his imperfections. So often people do take pot shots at him, and I always think like, okay, what is their motive for taking a pot shot at this guy?
Right.
Do they want to be like the number one person in recovery? Are they selling something?
Yeah.
Do they have something that will make them money? And the message of Bill Wilson is for fun and for free, and that doesn't really resonate with them. They don't want for fun and for free. They want to be able to make some money, and I always worry about like what really is somebody's motivation when they go after him, because sure, yeah, he's an easy target in some ways, but when you add together all of his insight and all the amount of wonderful writing he has about alcoholism and about the recovery process from alcoholism, that far outweighs whatever personal personal inconsistencies
Sure.
he's had.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Indeed.
So deep down, I think we AAs have begun to sense this magnificent possibility. The widening conviction that active leadership ought to be transitory and rotating, that each AA group, with respect to its own affairs, need to be accountable only to its own conscience, that our committees and boards are really servants, not officials, that we as a movement ought to remain poor, so avoiding the risks of disrupting wealth, that as individual members of AA we should remain anonymous before the general public. These are the signs and portents of a unique future. Such concepts certainly leave little room for a prestige-clothed leadership. And with this philosophy, he blew up a lot of the early members who wanted to run things
Yeah.
in their groups or whatever. The message was sent: be collaborative, be compassionate, be understanding, and always think about what's best for the group, what's best for the new alcoholics coming in. But some say, how shall we make such a vision actually work when most societies have to rely so greatly on management, money, and heavily publicized leadership exercising powerful personal suasion? Yet incredibly, we are beginning to see our vision come alive. Even though we persist in looking with misgivings on any large accumulation of money or personal prestige in the name of Alcoholics Anonymous, we do continue to grow despite the absence of those sometimes unstable factors upon which other human endeavors must so often depend. It's incredible the basis of these traditions. Let's not have any money, Monty. Let's start something up, that's going to become worldwide. But let's not have any money. Yeah, let none of us, show our picture or our last name in press, radio, TV, or film. Uh, let's have rotating leadership so that no one can get entrenched and become the de facto voice
Yeah.
of a conference or an area or a district. Like if you were putting a business together, this is the exact opposite of what you would do.
Yeah, this flies in the face of everything Tony Robbins would teach you.
Absolutely. As stay humble, as you lead stay humble. But I believe more and more today, I believe that Bill Wilson was foreseeing. He was prophetic.
Yes,
He
indeed.
he could see problems coming before they came. Now, were there money problems early on? Yeah, he was being accused of stealing money that he wasn't. He was accused of trying to be a big shot when he wasn't. So he had some clues about why some of these traditions would be good. But I'm telling you, when he put the picture together of Alcoholics Anonymous, he was right, and it didn't look like it was going to work. Just like the 12 steps.
Right.
Monty, when you first walked into AA, I bet you didn't look up on the wall and look at the 12 steps and go, finally,
no.
something that's going to work.
No, I did
They
not.
they don't look like they're going to work this stuff. So,
Admit that I'm powerless? What in the world have I walked into? Everything that I've been taught is about, getting in touch with my true self and my self-esteem and putting myself, up above everything else so I can conquer. I thought, so I'm going to go and I'm going to get some help with this problem I have, and I'm going to learn how to be a powerhouse. That's what I thought.
yeah, I'm going to John Wayne myself through
That's
this
right.
stuff. And he's basically saying, no, you got to emo your way through
Right.
this,
Exactly.
and it just doesn't make a lot
hilarious.
of sense. But and I know you gain experience with this stuff, and it's spot on.
Spot
It's
on.
spot on what he put together. So it says, why is this possible? Is it because we are a superior people? Well, hardly. Far from being better than average, we are surely much more fallible. Strangely enough, our group strength seems to stem from our individual and ever potential weakness. We are alcoholics. Even though now recovered, we are never too far removed from the possibility of fresh potential disaster. Each knows he must observe a high degree of honesty, humility, and tolerance, or else drink again. For us of AA, to drink is to die. To love God and fellow man is to live. So, honesty, humility, and tolerance. Certainly that goes through the book Alcoholics Anonymous. You can't read the book Alcoholics Anonymous and not come away understanding that those are character traits that must be developed, grown toward. However, that's going to happen. I do a lot of talks, and I do a talk at a treatment center, and I put an ask it basket out a couple weeks ago, because listen, I get up there and I tell them what I think they ought to know, like week after week after week. I wanted to give them an opportunity to ask me, tell me what you want me to talk about, and one of the things was honesty, and my attitude on honesty has shifted. Not that I think you should be dishonest, but my perspective on the honesty that he's talking about has changed. When I first showed up, I was thinking cash register honesty. I mean, if somebody gives me change for a 10 and I gave them a 5, I got to stop right there and give the money back. And I do, Monty. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But that's a very simple form of honesty. I believe that the honesty he was talking about, when he begs us to be honest, he's just presented us with the chapter more about alcoholism and the chapter There is a Solution. And both of those chapters are designed to sell me on what alcoholism is. It's a basic description, the manifestations of how alcoholism presents, and that's what he's just shown me and given me the information I need to identify whether I am an alcoholic or not, right?
Yeah.
So that's really where I have to be honest. And you and I see it all the time in the recovery world where people just aren't being honest. They're like, yeah, I'm going to some meetings, yeah, but I'm not really buying into this whole thing. Well, they're not being honest about their alcoholism. They're not being honest about their powerlessness. They're not being honest about the obsession of the mind and the need for a power greater than themselves. And I think that's really where we need to be honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So I want to interject something here. I'm gonna go down a rabbit trail just for a minute. And I shared this on a show. I shared a show with a guy named Dion who is he's part of our recovery podcast network that I've added to our website, and he has a podcast, and so we did step 4 on my show last week, and we're going to do step 5 on his show next week. But prior to the show, I have my little weekly wine, or my last week was Monty's Conspiracy Corner, right? And I gotten this letter, which kind of speaks to what you're saying, and I'll read it to you. It's an email. I am a heroin addict. I had 1.5 years off everything, got suicidal and relapsed, went through treatment, and I'm in what's called a recovery house. The recovery house has guys who are newly sober. We pay rent, work, and follow a few simple rules. Part of the program is to attend AA. So I go to 3 to 5 times a week along with an IOP and therapy. AA preaches about 12 steps and will grant a psychic change, and allegedly you will stop drinking once you find faith by working the AA program. I ask questions. They tell me I need to be spiritual, so I ask to define that term. Nobody can. I ask if I could do these steps without a higher power, and the answer from many is that unless I find a God, I will die. AA is the most presumptuous, ridiculous, over-the-top, groupthink, nonsensical, faith-based cult. I am absolutely shocked at the lack of logic. Apparently, I'll be dead soon, so I thought I'd better post this now.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that great?
That's beautiful. Listen, there's people like him that write books.
Yes.
Why AA is a cult. Yeah,
yes.
Or something. Now, one of my spiritual teachers, I want to share this. One of my spiritual teachers made me really go into serious consideration about this: the difference between opinion and experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, and he likened it. He gave different examples. He said, okay, 2 twins. They both get really, really interested in mountain climbing. And one of the twins goes to every library he can find and reads every single book about the conquest of Mount Everest that he can find. And the other brother starts taking climbing lessons and actually gets on a team and goes over and climbs Mount Everest. Now, when you want to know about the experience of climbing Mount Everest, which one of those people would you ask?
The guy that's climbing.
You would ask the person that actually did it, right?
Yeah.
The other person, it's just theory. It's just opinion. It's not experience. So when someone goes into Alcoholics Anonymous and immediately gets pissed off about, all the language and what they want me to do, and you wouldn't believe, they want me to pray, and then they write a letter like was just written to you, they're writing from opinion. They have not taken the 12 steps.
Right.
They have not recovered from alcoholism. So they're giving us their opinion on Alcoholics Anonymous with no experience.
Yes.
I'll tell you what. Go through the 12 steps. Start to sponsor other people. Put a prayer and meditation discipline together. Pay all the money back that you've stolen. And then come talk to me about what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. I'm not interested in your opinion. I'll talk with you about your experience all day long.
Right. Yeah. Excellent.
You know?
Yeah. It's great. I think it was beautifully written, though.
You know, he's one of us, and probably needs a couple more years of getting his butt handed to him, and maybe he'll have a real surrender and come in.
Right.
You know, and people that are listening to me and you right now would have problems with what we're sharing, but we have experience with recovery.
Right.
We know that this stuff works because we've experienced it. Neither one of us thought it was going to work.
Right.
But for one reason or another, we became willing to do it. Right. So there's tons of people that complain about every tiny little aspect of the meetings.
Right.
But I like to say the meetings are the main purpose of an AA meeting is the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. And it's about getting us all together so that we can encourage and help each other take the 12 steps.
Yes.
That's what AA is. It's not a coffee clutch. It's not a place where you can go and talk about your lawnmower for 25 years. It's become that in some areas, and that's because the traditions allow it. But when you go back to the basic text, when you go back to the foundational documents of this thing, you understand that it's about taking spiritual exercises and having an experience with that.
Yeah.
And it's a recovery experience.
Yeah. Amen.
So you know, I feel for the person that wrote that letter. I love him, you know, because
Yeah.
he's me, you know,
Sure.
3 years before I got sober. You know, so I have a lot of compassion, and I just hope that the situations become tenable for another examination of this 12-step world, and maybe a willingness to give it a shot.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, he says, under such potent conditions, the impossible has become possible. When each AA's life literally depends upon his unselfish service to others, when false pride, self-pity, or unhealthy self-seeking is almost certain to be unmercifully chastised by John Barleycorn, he needs but a minimum of man-made rules or inspired leaders to hold him on the right course. Wow, what a great sentence. So each AA's life depends upon unselfish service to others. And when we get false pride, self-pity, or unhealthy self-seeking, it's almost certainly followed by a relapse.
Yes.
That's really strong. So because alcohol we don't need any punitive, you know, officials in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't need the tradition police. We don't need it because John Barleycorn is going to cut you down.
Yeah.
If you don't sail right.
And you know what?
I mean?
You know what? This isn't just limited to alcoholics and narcotic addicts and all that. This is a natural principle. This is like a natural law, right? So I referenced the movie last week, Jesus Revolution. So I'm going to reference it again. In this movie, Kelsey Grammer plays Chuck Smith, the founder of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And this was when the Jesus Freak movement really began and the Jesus music started coming in. And we went from hymnals to folk music kind of stuff. And young people were searching for truth. Now they're just searching to get high, but they really were searching for some sort of meaning, and they stumbled upon mind-altering substances, and when it bit them, and they saw this movement come along that was spiritual. They jumped on it, right? And it worked. Well, there were three main players. There was a guy named Greg Laurie, there was a guy named Chuck Smith, there was a guy named Lonnie Frisbee. Lonnie Frisbee was this, if it wasn't, Lonnie Frisbee was nitroglycerin and Chuck Smith was a marshmallow, right? And they met. And Lonnie Frisbee was charismatic. I mean, he was the hippie's hippie, and he softened Chuck Smith's heart to welcome the unwelcoming folks into the churches, and it changed everything. But Lonnie, he got pretty uppity, right? And here he was a powerhouse for God, and he changed all sorts of people's lives. But then he started to get very self-righteous, and he fell big time. And the movement continued, and it grew, and a lot of your Christian contemporary artists came out of that movement. Phil Keaggy is included in there, right? But Lonnie Frisbee, he ended up going into the Vineyard movement churches. They ended up throwing him out because he was unrepentant of his pride and ego. And I mean, and he ended up dying a horrible death. And it was all based primarily in him trying to take the reins away from the Creator. And so that's what I'm hearing here. This is a common problem with humankind. And once again, the alcoholic is an extreme example, of this kind of, I guess you could call it sin nature that we have to want to be the center of it all.
Money, power, prestige.
Yes.
And Bill understood that those things could make normal people very miserable, but they could kill us.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So it says, nor for long is he apt to continue anything harmful to AA unity. He knows so well that we AAs shall have to hang together or else hang separately. At first, living the spiritual life becomes because he must. He presently lives it because he wants to. Such is the truly providential circumstance in which we all find ourselves. That is why we are beginning to see new values in AA. We perceive in our midst a spiritual realm which can be little disturbed by the distractions of wealth or self-serving egocentricity. Man, this is one of the really good articles. So he's growing spiritually. He's seeing the people in AA grow spiritually. This is 1947, and and this is what he's seeing. That's just incredible. It says, against this background, let's have another look at Dr. Bob and me. Seemingly, the larger AA grows, the more our particular part in its creation and continuance tends to be emphasized. Our status remains exceptional. Nearly all early AAs have long since slipped over the sidelines, where if they have retained the confidence of all, they are frequently consulted. By common consent, they have become unofficial coaches, reservoirs of longer experience to be sought out in the pinches. Their alma mater is now served by new teams. These too will have their day on the field, then finally retire. That is, we think, as it ought to be. So he's talking about the old timers. So it's 1947. This thing started in 1935. So it's 12 years old?
Yeah.
Is my math right?
Yeah, I think so.
And he's talking about these wizened old sages.
Right, yeah.
Oh, man. Sometimes I wonder if somebody with 10 years should be left alone in my house. So it says, Dr. Bob and I feel this sound doctrine should apply to us as well. There seems no good reason to make an exception of the founders. The more we early members continuously occupy the center of the AA stage, the more we shall set risky precedents for a highly personalized and permanent leadership. To ensure AA's future, is this not the very thing we should carefully avoid? Of course, Dr. Bob and I do not want to ignore any special responsibility remaining still upon us. Quite the contrary, our principal mission today is probably that of helping AA form a sound tradition. But how, for example, can we advocate the traditional principles of rotating leadership if we allow the belief to grow that we ought to be permanent exceptions ourselves? Of course we cannot. He's rolling up to when he gives AA back to itself, which I think it was the 1950 international. If it wasn't the 1950, it was the 1955, where AA came of age.
Yeah.
And Bill stepped back from having really any authority. So it says, take for instance my own situation. It is known that my health is recently improved, that I'm going to a large regional conference. Instantly come warm but most urgent invitations to speak at gatherings all over North America. Most AAs being good salesmen, the pressure on me is truly enormous. While it's a wonderful feeling to be so much wanted, these bids do leave me in the middle of an acute dilemma, a real heartbreaker. How, in fairness, can I speak at 10 anniversary dinners and refuse 90? How can I make special recordings or telephone calls for all these occasions? Or again, how can I respond to all the mail I receive? How can I advise hundreds of individuals and groups about their special problems? It is a physical impossibility. Even though I could somehow accomplish all these things and to remain in the center of AA affairs indefinitely, would that be the best for AA in the long run? Surely you would agree that it would not.
Wow.
And no, Bill, don't go speak at 100 anniversaries. Please keep writing.
Yeah.
Is what I would tell him.
Do you think this was hard for him?
Being someone who self-admitted that he was a number one guy, he always needed to be the number one guy. I think it was something he had to really work at and pray for, this level of humility.
But you know what? I have so much respect for him because he's doing the right thing. It's got to be hard. I mean, it's almost, you know what it's like. Now, I can't even compare Take 12 Radio to this at all. It just doesn't match up with the amount of humility that Bill had. But it's like there was a guy from E! News that offered me some money, and I knew in my gut, I can't do that. I cannot. I just knew. I didn't know why. I just knew I couldn't. You know what I mean? But I'm telling you, I was, oh man, I wish we had that money. I mean, I thought about that later and everything.
Right.
So I can't imagine all the pressure on him and the influence and the self-esteem that it could have brought him and everything. And yet he's saying, I'm pumping the brakes. I'm not doing that. Wow. How can you not admire that?
He certainly did it for us.
Yeah.
And not for himself.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. So he says, so the problem of Dr. Bob and me comes down to this. We shall somehow have to decide just what few things we are still specifically fitted to do for AA and within the limits of our health, set about them. For my part, I feel I ought to do much more writing. Ooh, I had it right there, Monty.
Yeah, you didn't know. Yeah.
More AA Grapevine pieces, more pamphlets, and possibly a new book dealing with the vital matter of AA unity. So he's about to write the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions.
Yeah.
This material ought to be widely informative for our developing traditions and of the little understood AA General Service Center. Occasionally, I would like to appear at the larger regional gatherings for the purpose of discussing these matters with as many AAs as possible. One of the things that was happening around this time, and I used to collect like recordings. The older the AA talks, the better for me. I really wanted to know what was going on back in the old days. And they used to talk about Bill. Bill would come to these conferences. He'd go to the Texas State Conference, California State Conference, whatever. And they would beg him not to talk about the traditions. Please, Bill, don't talk. You don't talk. Please tell the bedtime story. That's what they called it when he told his story.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
because few people could
Stay
stay
awake.
awake for an hour and a half. While he told it. Because Monty, he talked like this.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
So they were begging him, but they didn't understand the importance of the traditions. They thought this was just some wacky thing Bill was,
Yeah.
involved in. But he went all around and convinced as many people as he could, and it ended up everyone that voted for the traditions, it was unanimous. Everybody voted the traditions in. So he's right at the beginning of he's put them together. He's right at the beginning of the promotional work. So it says, over the next 2 or 3 years, it will be desirable to broaden the base of our General Service Center here at New York so that it can handle a yearly meeting of out-of-town AAs with the trustees of the Alcoholic Foundation, the AA General Office staff, the AA Grapevine editors. This is to be called the General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the first time he's saying this, to my knowledge. That's what it's known as today. So it has to help construct such a conference will be a real task, which may eventually require us to visit a number of our large AA centers the country over. So he did do that, and the General Service Conference meets once a year. I had the opportunity to go to it because I sponsored a Grapevine editor.
Oh,
Right?
all right.
And the Grapevine editors get tickets, and they don't just get one ticket; they get 2 tickets. So I actually went to the General Service Conference. It was a to-do, It was
I'll
in
bet.
a very nice hotel in Manhattan. Must have cost a fortune. And Dr. Bob's son, Smitty, was the main speaker. And it was interesting. I wasn't deeply into service at that time, so there were some things that maybe didn't
Right.
didn't interest me like they would have if I was more deeply involved. But I'm glad to say that I actually went to one. They're not easy to go to. For the good of AA as a whole, these seem the things most needful to be done. If these projects are ever to be finished, I'm sure we can do little else. To succeed, we shall need real freedom of decision and few diversions. Hence, we beg your wholehearted cooperation. Though these assignments are still before us, Dr. Bob and I are now going to confess a deep yearning. As private citizens of AA, we shall often wish to come and go among you like other people, without any special attention. And while we would like always to keep the wonderful satisfaction of having been among the originators, we hope you will begin to think of us as early AAs only, not as founders. So can't we join AA too?
Wow, and there's the question. Wow. That's what he brought it around to? That blows my mind. That is not what I was expecting.
I wasn't expecting that either. I was expecting everyone wants to join AA now, and we have to say no. No,
wow, that is wow. I'm just blown away.
So I get this.
Yeah.
I get this. I'm lucky. I go to some fellowship meetings where, there's absolutely no doubt I am a member like any other member in these groups. Nobody pays more attention or less attention to me than anybody else in the groups. But I do know what it feels like to walk into a room and to not feel like just a regular member, because you're the speaker, you're the out of town speaker, and they've been listening to your CDs for years, and they want a picture with you, and
Yeah.
would you sign my big book? That happens, right? And that's dangerous stuff.
Is that uncomfortable for you?
It's not uncomfortable anymore, but I know it's dangerous. It's like it's like eating in a restaurant with a bar behind me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna be okay, but it would be better not to have the bar. It would be better not to have, people who treat you different, even if it's better, but treat you different. I like being able, and that's what Bill is talking about here. He wanted to be able to walk into a meeting and just be a member, but he couldn't be because as soon as Bill Wilson walked in, clear the schedule.
Yeah.
Bill, would you please speak for us?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what would happen to him all the time.
Wow.
So I get it, and I hope as a fellowship, I think he lived another 14 years, 47, 57, 67. No, he lived like another 28 years after he wrote that article. I hope he was able to experience, groups where
Yeah.
he was just Bill.
Often people that are members of a 12-step fellowship that also work in the treatment arena. In fact, some treatment centers make this a policy that they don't want you attending meetings that are in the same county or the same city, right? And so a lot of times those folks will, go outside of the area to go. I get it. It's an ethical thing and all that, and it certainly makes it more pleasant. Than they're not getting judged under the realm of, oh, you're a treatment person, but yeah, one of the things I was going to mention, one of the things that I noticed about Celebrate Recovery, and I don't know if this is the way it is in all CR meetings, the ones I've been to though, when they have a speaker, they don't spend any time introducing the speaker. Like, this is so-and-so, and he's done this, and he's done that, and we're so glad he's here. They just say, hey, Monty's here tonight. Monty, will you come up? And that's it. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I really
that's
do.
good.
Yeah. I think they're smart to do that. That's a fellowship that is growing by leaps and bounds. I mean, it
sure has.
really, really taken off. And it is funny, though, because they've made a couple of changes, just a couple, but in the steps, it says having had a spiritual experience instead of having a spiritual awakening. And I touched on that the other night. I had a lot of fun with it, and I got a lot of chuckles out of it, which I wasn't sure how they were going to receive it. I said, I love you guys. I love CR, but I got to tell you, I wish we'd leave some things alone, because I dropped acid and had a spiritual experience. So, and we talked a little bit about the difference, like you and I had talked about. But yeah, I'm proud of those guys. They're really they're carrying they're really carrying it, and they're doing a good job of it. And of course, this whole 12-step movement, it is one of, I think, what did somebody say? Oh, I know what it was. Dion said when he responded to that letter, when the guy said AA was a cult, he goes, yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous is the cult the largest cult that nobody wanted to join.
And you pay your dues before you even go to your first meeting.
That's right. That's great. All right. Well, next week we actually venture into part 2.
Finally.
Yeah, part 2, 1950 to 1958. AA grows to maturity. Woo! It's going to be some interesting stuff. So I'm looking forward to it, buddy.
Me too.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, folks. Listen, some of you are on social media. I sent out a graphic today with a link where you can catch up on all the shows if you aren't a social media person, but you're watching on YouTube or something like that. Simply visit us at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner. It'll say that at the end of this at the end of the bumper music thing here at the end of the show. But bookmark that, and you can catch up on all of these. You can download them, of course, for fun and for free. All right, until our next broadcast. This is the Monty'man along with Chris S. and the rest of the Take 12 Recovery Radio family, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof.